What's going on, guys? Pegasus and the Wise guys. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you sub, make sure you hit the bell, guys. Happy New Year to you. On this video, I wanted to talk about Dynorphia, a deck that really thrives on really putting itself up against the ropes. Guys, we're gonna look at this deck. I've been wanting to talk about it for a while. You guys saw it on the community page, and you kept pushing it to the back of the fray because you wanted to see some other decks and other combos first. Well, guys, I appreciate that because it made me take some extra time with this deck, and I really feel like this deck is a possible meta deck of tomorrow. So without further ado, let's look into it, shall we? Alrighty, guys, so with those niceties and salutations out of the way, let's get into it. Dinorphia is a card that gets to actually set a trap card directly from your deck. When passing to your opponent, in this basic combo, Dinorphia Domain is the trap card. I almost wanted to say fusion spell. I do that all the time. But this card allows you to summon the original fusion in the archetype, which is Dinorphia Gina. We'll get into the other one later on. And this card loses attack equal to your life points, and then obviously it has some other effects, one being a float and the other one being to copy a trap effect. Now, the copying the trap effect in this specific scenario, I'm showing copying the other trap card, the domain trap card, to be able to fuse again. I keep wanting to fight to say fusion spell, fusion trap. That is a new saying that we got to get used to. But that allows you to summon Stealth Begia, and Stealth Begia is an interesting card that I'll again highlight later because it allows you to be able to do stuff without paying any life points, which is really insane. It opens up a whole nother skill cap to the deck as well. Dinorphia Alert is a card that allows you to summon out multiple Dinorphia monsters from your graveyard whose total levels equal 8. And in this specific scenario, I wanted to show Diplos being the card that allows you to jump the trap card Brute, and then Sonic being the card that you set, which is an Omni Negate. Brute essentially is the trap card form of Phoenix Enforcer for this archetype, which essentially Gina gets to turn into an Enforcer in a pseudo type of way. And I find that kind of interesting. I definitely feel like that's super duper interesting. Now, obviously, guys, I feel like this specific scenario would be how you would start off your turn by starting off with the Lagia to then be able to push through your opponent's board and then using the Omni Negate to be able to push even further. And this second combo, again, guys, I just wanted to show if you open up slightly differently, it's pretty much still the same thing. You're still wanting to fuse on your opponent's turn. You're still wanting to drop some other cards and then fight back through your opponent's board by setting up the same kind of Omni Negate into a big monster pop, or a big card pop in general. And that is essentially what I feel like you would want to do a lot of the times with this deck. What needs to also be highlighted is how the smaller ones can float, as well as the big fusion can float. And obviously, as I highlighted before, with the ability to pop, you truly have an Enforcer-like effect, as well as 2 trap cards in the grave to help protect you from certain effect damage, certain damage in general, etc., etc. I think you should definitely take some time with this archetype if you're planning on playing it, and familiarize yourself with all of the trap cards because they're all separately really interesting, and it takes some time to be able to understand some of the fringe cards within this deck. The other card I want to talk about is Rextrum that just got revealed, I believe, last week. This card is super duper interesting. It says monsters your opponent controls with an attack equal or higher than your life points cannot activate their effects. That's really insane. The quick effect says you can pay half of your life points until the end of this turn. The attack of all monsters your opponent controls becomes equal to your life points. I find that extremely powerful, and I definitely feel like there's only going to be more and more the longer this archetype goes on. I'm really fascinated by this deck, and I really feel like it's a new meta contender. That's just my opinion, guys. I can be completely wrong. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And we're going to continue on with this video, but I wanted to specifically show each and every one of these cards as they're coming across your screen. One being an Omni Negate, 2 fusion trap cards, and then obviously with the rest of it you have Alert to be able to summon out of the deck, and then lastly Brute to be able to pop from the grave like the Enforcer style effect that I described before. All of these cards are very good, very powerful, and really work in tandem, kind of like the Eldritch archetype does. That's my fast way of explaining this deck in a way. It feels like an updated version of Eldritch, where it kind of is going in its own way, and it's just super duper awesome artwork that people are going to enjoy anyway. And people like Dino decks in general, at least in the history of the game that I've observed. In this combo, I just wanted to show, in case you don't open up Theresia, which is what you always want to open up. As long as you open up Domain, you're still in good shape. And Diplos is the card that is pretty much a Foolish Burial Goods on legs for the Dinorphia archetype. To be able to dump any trap card that you want. Usually selecting Brood is the correct choice because it's the Enforcer style effect that can actually turn Ketchagina into an Enforcer. This is pretty much a standard setup as well that I definitely feel will help you in the long run inside of this archetype. I definitely feel there's different combos that you're going to have to know for specific matchups. You may want to end on this kind of pop. In another matchup, you may want to wipe out all of your opponent's back row or wipe out the setup that they'll be able to set up with having cards like Strike, as well as a Torrential, and much more. If the opponent has specific stuff where they're summoning low level monsters, maybe they're normal summon Alistair the deck, etc., etc. If you can turn off of their effects with some of these cards, you're definitely in good shape. And being able to play around with your life points and put yourself up against the ropes to be able to do so, it's just really interesting. If you actually look at the etymology of the deck, at least in the English translation for Dynorphia, which is what the name has been changed to, it definitely means something to do with endorphins. So I feel like that's what the etymology or a study of the words is in this specific scenario. Getting into the combos again, guys, I feel like that's a really standard board, but I wanted to show Theresia by herself. If you're wondering what she is and what she signifies by herself, well, this is pretty much it. Essentially, when you summon her, you're setting any trap card. In this specific scenario, I wanted to show Dinorphia Frenzy, and Dynorphia Frenzy is the new trap card, just got revealed at the end of this past week, and that allows you to also summon Ketchagina the same way. Now, I obviously just feel like this is just an additional like El Shaddoll fusion, 2 Shaddoll fusion. You got to have another one, and I actually feel like this one might actually be slightly better, but that's going to take some time to kind of see that in the long run. But in this specific scenario, again, guys, you're attempting to fuse to be able to set up a card like Rextrum. And in Rextrum, in this specific scenario, my bad about the big arrow, but in this specific scenario, I wanted to show how you can actually get to pay. This Rextrum card essentially is an extremely powerful control card because cards like this allow you to end games extremely quickly, and having a card like Ketchagina on the field as well that's 4,000, and being able to manipulate stuff like possibly having a skill drain behind that, maybe having a card that can chalice her. If they chalice her, or if you have an application of that coming up inside of the meta in the future meta game, I definitely think a card like Chalice being in the meta game, you can OTK your opponent with the Chalice out of thin air. I find that really fascinating, and I really feel like for a trap card deck to have that is a really new way of playing the game, as well as the life point thing in general, which I also find fascinating. Think about it in this way, guys. If like a Dragoon is on the field and possibly a negation has already been baited out, to be able to drop an attack level or attack stat all the way down to below him is really good. I say that for a control deck that's really good. In this specific combo, this is just a test hand with Dino, where I wanted to show specifically how you could maybe have a similar setup and then essentially still get there in some kind of way, shape, or form. Obviously, I feel like if you open up Misk inside of the actual Dino deck, then you're always in good shape. But in this specific scenario, and I do feel like Miscellaneousaurus can be used in a generic build without all of the other Dino stuff, just because it protects the Dinos that you'll have out on the field. This is essentially the combo of getting Archosaur into the Overwrapper into extending out into the pill and all that other crap. You know, you guys know how Dino works out. That pretty much is the same kind of setup, and being able to end on a board like this plus a Ultimate Conductor Tyranno plus a rank 4 that will possibly be next to it, and then an essential card like Solemn Judgment behind that after you get to destroy cards, and essentially float off of Overraptor itself interacting with Dinorphia Theresia and Dinorphia Diplos. I just feel like there's definitely a lot of synergy within the Dino sub archetype in general, and I really feel like that's going to be something that you may want to explore yourself. I'm not necessarily a Dino guy. I've never been that guy, but I've definitely had a lot of good friends in Kansas City locals that have played the deck at a really high level, and I've always enjoyed observing the deck. So this is my attempt at actually showing some kind of list Do not take my list for anything that you would actually play if you're like a Dino player, because you guys know the deck a hell of a lot better than me. But this is like essentially where I would at least start from, and definitely I don't feel like Gamma is absolutely necessary, and things just may have changed within the deck in general, and it just may be the incorrect and worst version of Dino and of Dinorphia, because I definitely feel like Dino at some point will be relevant again, but that's just something that you may want to check out for yourself. As far as the actual deck itself, I just wanted to highlight a few cards first. Temple of the Kings is really interesting, but the old Temple of the Kings is probably a hell of a lot better, and this card definitely is not relevant, and I wouldn't play it, but it's definitely something you may want to consider. Activating trap cards immediately may just be something decent, but that wouldn't do anything but change the tempo of the game a little bit as far as it's on your turn. Secondly, I wanted to talk about Sky Prison. I definitely feel this card belongs in the deck, but I just hadn't have enough time to deep dive and deep test like that, but I definitely feel like it's something you should consider. Air Neos as well as Neos Fusion is something really interesting I feel you should consider if you were considering playing a fusion package, because this says while your life points are lower than your opponent's, this card gains attack equal to the difference. I feel like that matters a little bit, guys, and it's something that you may want to consider, and you may want to play some of the cards in the old setup where you can have the same ability to be able to blow your opponent away, but at least with that card, I feel that you have something. Air Neos is a definite possibility for this deck. Just my opinion though, take it or leave it. In each of these scenarios, I feel like they're all niche situations, and Axe of Fools I find really interesting, because essentially it can be a chalice-like effect if you're trying to 1-for-1 with your opponent, and if you equipped it to something like Catch Your Gina, it's at 5,000 randomly. Again, guys, for a control deck to be able to turn the corner like that and then punch you in the head for 5,000, that may be something that you want to consider. As well as a card like Megamorphs. If you're doing that, where your life points are lower, isn't that a good thing for you? That may be something you want to consider as well. Imagine a control deck. I don't remember a control deck that has a massive knockout punch like this deck. And again, guys, this is just another card to consider. Again, I already talked about the fusion spell to go along with that. The Pointer of the Red Lotus is another card that I feel like is a metagame kind of card. I played a lot of different decks, and I'm really a large fan of that card, and I definitely feel like having perfect knowledge of your opponent's hand is something you may want to have in your side deck if you're planning on playing this deck. Hope for Escape is an interesting card, but I don't feel like the tempo of the card works very well. Red Reboot will fit in the deck very nicely if you're planning on playing it as well. Reverse Trap, I'm talking about this card because I find that as one of the funniest cards in interactions in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Remember, Catcher Gina says loses attack equal to your life points. Reverse Trap says, as we look at it, until the end phase, essentially everything is flipped. Add or subtract defense, everything is flipped, from addition to subtraction and multiplication to division, etc. Imagine essentially going from 4,000 to being able to deal 8,000 in the damage step to your opponent. Reverse Trap is probably really cheesy, but that's something you may want to check out. As well as Soul Strike, as well as Trap of Darkness, which is another essential card. I used to play Hope for Escape. I used to play Nurse Burn a long time ago when I was a horrible player, and that also may be something you want to consider as well. Vanity's Call is a really interesting tech because essentially, and I may be wrong on this, and correct me in the comments if you feel like I am, negate the activation and effects of all other cards in the same chain and destroy them, and then pay a specific amount of life points. Remember that? Well, this card, remember when it says while your life points are 2,000 or less, you do not pay to activate trap cards or Dynorphia effects. This card says pay half of your life points, negate everything in the chain. What if your opponent attempts to chain block and they go chain link 1, chain link 2, chain link 3, and then you flip that card? Isn't that game? Definitely something to consider as well. If you're still hanging in there with me, guys, as I'm talking, I know I'm talking your head off, but I really feel like this deck is fascinating. Spooky Dogwood is a really interesting card because essentially she fits the deck in a reverse kind of way. If you have her in your side deck and you activate her on your opponent, you're going to do well in time if you're side decking. If you're not, then essentially having a card like that where they don't actually special summon you can preempt them, they may pass your turn and your life points get cut in half. Great, That works perfectly for what you're trying to do with this archetype, does it not? Along with Ferret Flames and other additional cards, essentially anytime that you pay your life points down so quickly, having a card like Ferret Flames, which basically is literally a ferret shooting flames out of his butt, you essentially get to wipe out your opponent's entire board as soon as they try to push for any type of actual damage. And in the rest of the effects, like Rextrum, being able to protect cards like this, I really feel like this is a powerful archetype that is just kind of cracking the surface and just starting off as far as getting into the deep diving type of stuff with this archetype. I wanted to also mention Dynorphia. I feel like it will definitely be necessary to be in your extra deck because you only have these monsters and they can float very well, and it can extend the game into more of a grind game and help you in the grind game. Now, what do you guys think? Do you think this deck is meta or nah? Let me know what you guys think about this deck down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Make sure you cop these mats that are coming out, and all will bow before Emperor Penguin. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I'm out. Pegasus out. Ciao, Bella.